Unbelievable. What is that? That's no principle. That's just American vulgar arrogance.
If people understood how ill-prepared this president is, they'd be embarrassed.
The Iranians simply said, we regard these people as Israeli assets, and frankly, that's what everybody does see them as. We don't see them as representing American national interests.
But then again, as you know, there are all these Israeli assets who operate inside the U.S. government. People like Kushner, people like Steve Witkoff, even people like Michael Waltz.
Well, ultimately, Trump is going to have to recognize that he is not going to get at the negotiating table what he could not get on the battlefield.
Things have changed to no return, to my understanding. The Strait is the key and is the table of negotiations.
Guys, I've got a banger today for you. I'm going to be putting together a compilation of every single geopolitical analyst, commentator, literally every single one you know, all talking about the war in Iran and how badly it is going for the United States right now and also for the global economy in general. But before we do, guys, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Also drop in a comment or even sharing with someone that you know. It really helps me, and I'm just trying to get to 100 subscribers. Let's get right to it.
I'm Jeremy Scahill from Dropsite News. The war launched by Donald Trump and Israel against Iran on February 28th has not gone the way that Donald Trump imagined it would. Iran had telegraphed long in advance that it was not going to proceed the way it had in previous occasions when the United States and Israel had bombed it. Namely, it was not going to choreograph its retaliatory strikes or engage in any kind of back-channel discussions prior to launching them. In fact, Iran said that it was going to delegate command authority further down the line and that it was going to immediately begin counterstrikes on a bank of targets that had already been predetermined. So what we've seen over the past weeks is that Iran has struck U.S. installations, military facilities across the Persian Gulf. It's pummeled Israel on an unprecedented level with ballistic missile and drone attacks. And this has resulted in the United States having to evacuate military bases and other facilities across the region. Now, there has been a lot of talk about a potential deal. Donald Trump has falsely claimed for many weeks that Iran was begging him to make a deal. Senior Iranian officials told me, however, that roughly the third or fourth day of the war, after it launched on February 28th, Steve Witkoff and other American officials began reaching out to Iran, asking it to talk. And we are now in a situation where the Iranians have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire that ends on Wednesday. And there's questions about whether there's going to be a resumption of the U.S.-Israeli attacks or diplomacy is going to prevail in some form. Iran was very skeptical of entering into this kind of a temporary pause, in part because it felt that the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, the unexpected damage that it had caused to American military facilities, the fact that Israel's supply of interceptors we know was dwindling, that Iran had leverage that it had not had even prior to the launch of this war.
We had hope a week ago because we had a truce in Lebanon. President Trump with Marco Rubio, they're brokering this truce. And within 48 hours, as you have been reporting, this whole thing just came unglued and they're shooting at each other again. Well, this is because these issues are that zero sum. I wrote a big article on the Substack about the zero sum nature. It is not possible that Iran can control the Strait of Hormuz and have all that global power and not. It is not possible Iran can have the beginnings of the material for a nuclear weapon and not. And this is about power. If Iran gives those two things up, what's to stop other states, Israel, from demanding even more and bombing them even harder to get things they want, or just literally to wreck them like they've wrecked Gaza and they're wrecking Lebanon? We're $40 trillion in debt. We're messing with the world's economy. We're not exactly in the position, we're not even in the position we were with COVID, because we've lopped on so much debt in our country. I'm concerned that we're rocking this boat at the worst possible time for our debt situation.
To understand that the Israelis and the lobby have a stranglehold on Trump, and Trump has limited maneuver room. He can't just do what he wants to do. He has to make sure that he checks with Tel Aviv or with Jerusalem, and he gets permission. Because if it begins to stray, enormous pressure is brought to bear on him. And up to now, he's been brought into line. Oh, I think that probably almost everybody who's in a decision-making position in both the United States and Israel recognizes that up to this point, we have failed to achieve our objectives. I mean, that's crystal clear. I think the interesting question is, where do you go from here? And I think that almost all Israelis want to see the United States continue the war. They want us to see us launch a massive bombing campaign along with the Israelis against Iran and continue to pummel away at that country. Here in the United States, I would bet that most of President Trump's advisors would like to shut this war down, and they see the Israelis as a huge problem. But then again, as you know, there are all these Israeli assets who operate inside the US government. People like Kushner, people like Steve Witkoff, even people like Michael Waltz. And we refer to them more generally as neoconservatives, but neoconservatives is a euphemism for, pro-Zionist forces inside the United States. And they basically follow the Israeli line. And this is the problem that Trump faces. Trump is caught between two powerful sets of forces. On one side, there is an imperative to shut this one down so as to stem the bleeding in terms of the international economy. But on the other side are the Israelis and their very powerful supporters here in the United States. And I think that is reflected in Mike Waltz's comments.
Does the United States engage in any serious diplomacy these days?
Not really. And you see this, by the way, in the Ukraine case, right? Remember, President Trump said that when he came into office, he would shut down the Ukraine-Russia war overnight. In fact, he promised, or he said, that there was a good chance he would shut it down before he even moved into the White House. It's been a total failure. And if you look at how we have behaved in the negotiating process, you just scratch your head and say, does the Trump administration have any understanding of how to conduct diplomacy?
I think what we need to do is go back to the previous meeting in Islamabad and look at what actually occurred. The first thing, which I think is very revealing, is that the Iranians showed up with 70 people. They had large numbers of experts in various fields. They were carrying maps, geological surveys. They were loaded for bear, frankly, to discuss in detail what they would accept in terms of conditions and what they would not and what they would negotiate. We showed up with Vice President Vance and Messrs. Witkoff and Kushner, who had previously been judged as unwanted members of the delegation. The Iranians simply said, we regard these people as Israeli assets, and frankly, that's what everybody does see them as. We don't see them as representing American national interests. So they were prepared to talk with Vice President Vance, but not them. Unfortunately, as far as we know, there was otherwise no supporting staff. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened. This happened in Anchorage. The Russians showed up and were prepared for very substantive talks. They brought with them all sorts of material pertaining to Ukraine, current state of affairs, troop locations, recommended solutions, and so forth. We showed up with nothing. And Trump thought that he was going to charm his way into some sort of agreement. As it turned out, he conveyed the impression that we were prepared in the future to do all sorts of things. And it took some time for the Russians to discover that they were being lied to. Now, I think the Iranians know they've been lied to. So what can we expect from this meeting? You have the same people. Are they walking in with anything of substance? Are they prepared to sit there, not for a day or two, but for however long it takes to reach some sort of agreement? I'm very skeptical, and I'm sure that the Iranians are very skeptical. So that's the first part. The second part is, as far as I can tell, and I don't have access to classified information, the Iranians have made it pretty clear that the time for negotiation, as far as they're concerned, is over. They're not interested in talking anymore. Frankly, there was a lot of opposition to signing on for the ceasefire that we wanted. Thanks to Donald Trump and the support from the media that he gets with regard to his public statements, the American people were under the impression that somehow or another we were in the driver's seat. we're not. The strategic initiative firmly rests inside Iranian hands.
People need to understand that we were very close to having an agreement the first time around. The Trump administration, J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner, they didn't come in prepared at all. They were prepared for nothing. People were wondering why there were so many phone calls. It's because the United States didn't bring anything to the table. The Iranians brought everything to the table, the deal, everything, all the research. They had all the fact papers, everything worked out. And so what would happen is the Iranians would put a deal down. The Americans would review it, ask some questions. The Iranians would give the answers. Now, because there is no position, because they went in blind, J.D. Vance has to call back and say, hey, this is what the Iranians are saying. And Trump, of course, not prepared at all. I mean, if people understood how ill-prepared this president is, they'd be embarrassed. So Trump isn't prepared at all. He doesn't have briefing papers in front of him. He's receiving a verbal report and then giving back instructions based upon nothing, because he doesn't know what the details are or anything. He doesn't have his staff prepping him on this. This is just purely reactionary work. And then Bibi Netanyahu sticks his head in at the appropriate time about nuclear issues. They were actually this close, according to Professor Marandi, to signing a Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, which would have brought an end to this war. But the president was told, you can't sign this deal because it makes it look like you're weak. It makes it look like you're doing the Iranian bidding. Well, of course he is. The Iranians are the only one putting talking points on the table. The United States has no talking points. And so J.D. Vance is pulled from the J.D. Vance, Kushner, and Witkoff are pulled from the negotiations, and they're brought to an end as Trump then proceeds to make his ridiculous, demands, and then back it up with posturing that, look, we're going to blockade you until you do what we want you to do.
We can see what's happening, and it's so bizarre. It's primitive. None of us would behave this way. It's only the arrogance of power that has the United States behaving the way it does. But let's just recap for the last couple of weeks. A ceasefire was reached. It was clear what it meant. All shooting should stop. Israel should stop its attacks in Lebanon. The United States and Israel should stop bombing Iran. Iran would stop retaliating with its strikes in the Gulf and against Israel. That's what a ceasefire is. As soon as that happened, Israel carpet bombed Beirut. And the Iranians said, we have a ceasefire. And the Americans said, no, it doesn't cover Lebanon. And then the Pakistani mediator says, excuse me, it does cover Lebanon. So when the attacks on Lebanon continued, then the Iranians said, well, look, we don't have a ceasefire. We closed the straits. Then Trump says, okay, we blockade Iran. Then apparently Trump said to Netanyahu, stop the attack so we can get back to the ceasefire. So Israel, after massive killing of innocent people, bombing of Beirut, stopped the bombing. Then the Iranians said, okay, we'll open the straits. Then Trump says, but we're going to keep the blockade anyway. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What is that? That's no principle. That's just American vulgar arrogance is all it is. And so things broke down because the United States can't keep any deal for more than a minute, because the mindset of the United States is, why should we be talking with them? We are the United States. They need to surrender. That's all. It's simple. All the rest is a charade.
Well, ultimately, Trump is going to have to recognize that he is not going to get at the negotiating table what he could not get on the battlefield. He lost the war. The Iranian people were able to stand up a joint war where the Trump regime, the Netanyahu regime, and a coalition or proxies in the region along with them were assisting them, and they failed. So why should Iran submit to the United States? If the United States wants a peace agreement with Iran, then it has to be a balanced agreement. But if Trump thinks that he can impose his will like an emperor and an imperial power, well, the revolution 47 years ago put an end to that. That's what the revolution was about. And that's what the Iranians are going to continue to do. They're going to preserve their dignity and sovereignty. That's something that the United States, especially under Trump, is not used to seeing. But Iran is different from other countries.
Turns out the world uses about 100 million barrels of oil every single day. That's at full capacity. What's missing right now is somewhere between 8 to 13 million barrels of that per day. That doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot. For context, the United States uses about 20 million barrels a day. So we're talking about losing the equivalent of half of America's daily oil usage. This is every day for weeks now. Now, one energy fund manager I came across put a specific number on the total damage, which is that the world will have lost 780 million barrels over the course of this conflict. Now, for context, the whole US SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, holds about 400 million barrels, but it was already half empty before the war started. So we're talking about losing twice the entire emergency reserves the United States spent decades saving up. Now, obviously, countries have prepared for stuff like this, but they still won't have enough to cover what was lost without paying those higher prices. For example, US spare capacity is at about 1 million barrels a day. Venezuela, under 1 million. Canada, via Pacific routes, under 1 million. And if you add every alternative together, you'll get about 2.8 million barrels per day from all the temporary emergency stockpiles. 2.8 million barrels against a whole of 8 to 13 million, which means reserves will eventually run out and there will be a shortage. So then, when is the world going to start feeling the effect of this missing oil? And according to the best research I was able to find, most likely sometime in mid to late April is when those global oil supplies run out. We are in mid-April right now.
Things have changed to no return to my understanding. The Strait is the key and is the table of negotiations. Everything is being put on that table. You want to get into negotiations, the Iranians say to the United States, stop the war in Lebanon. You want to have free flow of shipments and goods through the Strait, then you have to give Iran the remedies to what you did to the infrastructure and the sanctions, unilateral sanctions you imposed on Iran.
So there you have it, guys. This is truly, truly sad moments that we're going through right now. We have a leadership at the White House that they don't seem to know what they're doing. This situation doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Energy prices are surging. We are going to be paying more for our goods now because this chokehold that Iran has is not going. We are going to be feeling it right now. Iran has said this is their red lines and they're not going to go past it. Military option is no longer going to work because they have tried it for 40 days and it ended up going nowhere. The only option is we have to negotiate with them and recognize that we have turned Iran into a regional superpower, whether we like it or not. What Trump did on February 28th was the most disastrous choice he could ever make, but he did it. Now we are left to deal with the consequences of this war. Only time will tell how this ends. But anyway, guys, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and also comment. Thank you.